us in our Sunday afternoon media conference. Shifted the room, but we hope that you are comfortable nonetheless. I have two colleagues with me this afternoon, two members of our activist council. On my right is Winston Wilson, and on my left is Wayne Cyrus. Both of them are members of the activist council of the MSJ, and both of them have been approved for being candidates of the MSJ, the upcoming local government elections in the Siparia Regional Corporation. And they were announced last Saturday at our independence activity here at our party office. We want to deal this afternoon with the 4th anniversary of the Rowley-led PNM government, which won elections on the 7th of September 2015. So yesterday would have marked the 4th anniversary of their electoral victory, and therefore today, the 8th of September, would be the start of their 5th year in government. The headline in today's Express, based upon a poll conducted by Dr. Nigel Henry of Solution by Simulation, that poll had a headline saying, Rowley rules. So I want to suggest that based on the actual polling information that has been published in the Express as part of this poll, which identifies the fundamental problems which the country faces, that we can say that Rowley rules, but the country loses. And so that is our assessment of this particular poll. Why do we say that the country loses and is losing and has lost in the last 4 years? Because according to the poll data, 56% of the population think and believe that crime is a crisis for the country. Another 38% say it is a major problem. So if you add a major problem to those who feel it's a crisis, 94% of the population are saying that crime is a major, major concern to them. With respect to the economy, 40% have said that the economy is in crisis. A further 33% say it is a major problem. That means that 73%, almost 3/4, are saying that the economy is a major concern to them. With respect to corruption, the figures are 38% and 40% respectively. 38% saying corruption is a crisis, 40% saying that it is a major problem. So a total of 78%, over 3/4 of the population, say that corruption is a major concern to them. And with respect to infrastructure, the figures are 34% and 31% respectively. Again, a significant majority, 65%, are saying that infrastructure is a very serious problem, a major concern or crisis to them. We identify ourselves based upon our moving around Trinidad and Tobago. And just a few nights ago, I was in the part of the Sawa-Laventille Regional Corporation, meeting young people in a particular area there. And for them, the issue of jobs is a major problem, and not only for them as young people, but throughout the country. Problem of jobs, unemployment, with a huge retrenchment that took place at Petrotrin, previous to that ArcelorMittal, retrenchment at UTT, threatened retrenchment at Unilever, retrenchment at Agostini, and many other companies that have sent home workers and or that have closed down or have been closed. Unemployment is a major problem. And then other people, particularly our young people who have never been employed or who have been employed for very short periods on contracts that are bad contracts, they're short-term contracts, and so on. Jobs are a major problem, and not just jobs, but decent work. So those who are employed are working for very low wages and minimal terms and conditions of employment. So the issue of jobs is a major, major problem. A decent income. And it's not just jobs, because when meeting with people, they're saying that they have registered companies, they would like to start up agricultural projects, get land and get resources to develop cooperatives and their own businesses and so on. And those types of support mechanisms are just not in place. The issue of crime, I've already identified that. in terms of what the poll itself said. 94% say it is either a major problem or a crisis. That's a huge, huge number. That's almost unanimous of the population, which cuts across all lines: age, gender, race, status in the society. Almost unanimously, the people of this country say that crime is either a crisis or a major problem. The other issue that we want to identify where the country is losing while Rowley rules is that of the cost of living and high prices. So that although that was not part of the polling data, our own understanding of how people are living today, given the fact that wages and salaries have not gone up for the last 3 to 5 to, in some cases, 10 years. Prices have been going up constantly in that period. Don't mind the official data may show that the rate of inflation is relatively low. People who have to go to the groceries, particularly single parents, mothers and so on, who have to face the grocery, have to deal with increased cost of transportation, the issue of school books, which I identified last week, Saturday, a few days before the start of the school term, where parents have to put up thousands of dollars to buy school books and so on, quite apart from uniforms and shoes and other requirements. The cost of living is horrendously high in a situation where wages or salaries for the vast majority of the population have not been increased in the last 5 to 10 years. And so while Rowley may rule according to the polls, the country is certainly losing, and people are suffering in the situation from high crime. People are suffering from the problem of unemployment, the problem of jobs that are not paying them decently and so on, and people are suffering because of high prices and therefore are unable to make two ends meet. And that is the context in which we want to situate the country today, 4 years after the PNM government. Let me say that an MSJ government would tackle these things with great urgency. And we have advocated specific policies of what we call the social economy, where we would ensure that cooperatives are formed in communities to enable young people and others to have their own businesses collectively owned, to engage in projects, whether it is agricultural projects and going downstream of agriculture in terms of value added, in terms of processing the products that they would be growing and other items and so on, to transform CPEP into cooperatives. So instead of having a contractor having access to a contract, we would have the workers own the business as a cooperative and engage in other work besides cutting grass and so on. They'll be engaged in maintenance of community facilities like recreation grounds, health centers, schools, and the like, so that we build in the capacity to have people begin to own wealth and income, work for themselves, work cooperatively, and build a community sense of ownership of their communities as well. So a whole range of policies that we have proposed at the level of local government, because of course local government elections are coming up. At the level of local government, we advocate resources being allocated as of statute, similar to that of the THA, Tobago House of Assembly, which gets a certain percentage of the national budget as a almost legislated right. We would ensure that regional corporations are allocated resources in a similar way according to the population size and the needs of the different corporations and so on, that resources will be allocated out of the national budget. So you remove party politics from issues of resource allocation to the regional corporations and do it on the basis of a very transparent process. And then to ensure that it's not just the corporations that have control of those budgets, but that resources are also allocated to community and village councils as well, for them to engage in projects in their communities. So, whole range of proposals which the MSJ would engage in. A national development fund, financed through the very significant liquidity that exists in our financial sector, and that national development fund would then ensure that infrastructure, particularly infrastructure in our communities where there are major problems of drainage and roads and so on, bridges, agricultural access roads, that infrastructure is addressed. And that National Development Fund would not simply be going into the pockets of a few large contractors, the persons who Wayne Kubla Singh deems the contractocracy, but rather would go into community-based organizations and firms to ensure that, again, people in the communities get employment, and not just get employment, but also are owning businesses cooperatively, not just individual, but cooperative businesses to engage in the work, and therefore the resources of the country will serve the common good, which is set out as our objective in the preamble to the Constitution. So we would approach the way which economy is organized very, very differently to that was done by the UNC when it was in government, and that which has been done by the PNM under Dr. Rowley over the last 4 years. And in that way, we would address these issues of the economy, of infrastructure, and so on. We've already spoken about corruption and how we would address that. And quite clearly, when we give hope to our young people and we transform the education system and so on, and ensure that our young people are productively and gainfully employed or have businesses that enable them to have an income, that will ensure as well and contribute to the reduction of crime and violence in the society. So those were the statements that I wish to make on behalf of the MSJ today in response to the poll that came out in today's newspaper, The Express. There is a second part that will come out tomorrow. I can't anticipate what is in the second part, so I could only comment on that after I see it tomorrow, but I wanted to give an immediate response to the poll today. Rowley rules, but the country loses. Questions?
Based on everything you have said, Mr. Abdulah, you rate its performance. And I know you said the country loses, Rowley rules, but how would the MSJ rate that?
From what we are hearing on the ground, and so I'm giving the feedback that we are hearing on the ground. So this is now not simply a subjective view of myself or the MSJ. What we are hearing on the ground is that people are disappointed, people are fed up of both major parties. They're disappointed by Dr. Rowley and the PNM, that things that they expected to change in terms of a better life, those things have not happened and so on, that resources are not flowing down to the ground where people are, and therefore people are struggling to survive, they're suffering, and that is reflected in how people feel about the economy and other matters like that. So in that regard, people on the ground, I think, feel that Dr. Rowley and the PNM have failed, because you can't be succeeding and have crime almost unanimously as a crisis or major concern. You can't be succeeding if 3/4 of the population feel that the economy is in crisis or major problem, and so on.
I didn't really read the whole poll, right? But if he is saying that Dr. Rowley has 50%, does it mean that his approval rating is 50%, or it just means that across the board, all the people, like the 94% does go out the crime situations that comes into them, but 50% of them still approves of him as leader?
Yes, that is what the poll says, and I'm not going to detract from what the poll says or challenge it. I used other aspects of the poll and built a case around that, so that in terms of the specific questions that were asked, do you approve or do you disapprove? I suppose that was a specific question. 50% of the people polled said they approve. 38% of the people said, I think it was 38% said 38% said they disapprove, and 12% said they were not sure. So that is what people said in terms of that. But when they were then asked about how do they feel about Trinidad and Tobago and their own lives, that is what we are concerned about. In other words, we are concerned about how people are feeling in Trinidad and Tobago today, and how people's lives how people are living today, and how people feel, because to us that is what is most important. How people feel is that crime is a major crisis or major problem, almost unanimous. The economy, 75% feel the economy is a crisis or a major problem. And that is what we are responding to. How people are actually living, how people are feeling, rather than the issue of approval or disapproval. Because that is what ultimately leadership is supposed to be about. Leadership is supposed to be about making people's lives better, making people feel good about Trinidad and Tobago, making people feel safe and secure, making people feel that there's hope because the economy is generating activity so that they can live a decent life, that they could provide shelter for their family, put food on the table, that they could meet the high cost of living and so on. That is what leadership is about, dealing with those matters. And quite clearly, based upon the poll, Dr. Rowley and the PNM have not been dealing with that. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar didn't deal with it either, which is why she lost the last elections. Nikita.
Just to
Yes.
Sasha's question, are you willing to give like a percentage as to how you feel about it?
You know, I'm going to refrain from doing that, of giving up my own percentage approval rating. What I think I have said is that when it comes to the lives of people in this country, whether the lives of people are good today and so on, and whether Dr. Rowley therefore has contributed to people's lives being good, I would say no, that he has failed to do that, because he's failed to deal with crime and violence, he's failed to deal with the economy, he's failed to deal with corruption, he's failed to deal with infrastructure. Those are the 4 questions posed. And the other issue that we want to put on the table, of course, is that of prices and the cost of living, and therefore how people are managing in this country. And so I've said I would give him a failing grade without putting it, whether it is 10%, 20%, 30% out of 100. I'm simply saying that he has failed in that regard, because the lives of people are not better today.
With the elections less than local government, less than a few months, and general elections next year, do you think that maybe his approval rating would allow him and the party to go over to regain governance again?
Well, interestingly, according to this poll, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar's approval rating at the end of year 4 was 48%, and at the end of year 5 was 54%, but the partnership lost the elections. So the individual's approval rating does not necessarily determine the outcome of an election, okay? Does not necessarily. And a poll is what it is. It is a snapshot at a point in time of particular questions, so that we cannot predict now who will win or lose elections, okay? What the MSJ is focused on, so this is now, we are not now here as social scientists trying to do an analysis based upon polling and crystal balling and all of that. We are here as a political party, and MSJ as a political party is challenging the UNC and the PNM, because both of them have failed to deal with the problems that people have. Cost of living and prices, jobs, sustainable employment, decent pay for people, the issue of crime and corruption, infrastructure. Both of them have failed, and we are offering ourselves as the alternative to those parties, because we feel the ideas that we have and the policies and proposals that we have can bring about real change and fundamentally address the problems that people are experiencing in their everyday lives. Okay? Well, yes, that's a so many other aspects. We will see what else comes out in the papers today, and you're quite free to call me to ask me any further questions based upon tomorrow's poll results. Yeah? Thank you very much. Yeah.